Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
Going well. We're rolling along here. I've conquered some computer problems that have been haunting me for several years. So, things are looking up. How about you? What have you been doing? Have you been running?
Mainly hearing you complain about your computer problems is what I've been up to. Right. No, I've been doing now that we're back, I've been doing a bit of cross-country skiing, which has been really fun. Kind of actually figured out the ultimate combo for me is the cross-country ski followed by basically a brick with skiing and running. And oh my gosh, the different muscles it uses, especially because I'm not a good skier. I've talked about this ad nauseum. Terrible. It's like I'm just running with these giant long things attached to my feet. But the muscular work that it takes me to ski to then go into even a short run, my legs are so muscularly just done in that I think it's actually a fantastic stimulus for ultra because I'm going into it with legs that feel like I've already run 50 miles. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. And we do like the combining of sports. I know a lot of a question I've been getting a lot is around cross-country skiing being very cardiovascular for a lot of people, especially the skate skiing variation of Nordic skiing. And so that's what we often recommend if someone is trying to get a few hours of training in. They've maybe gone to a center, an outdoor center or a ski center. Sometimes you can combine this. Maybe if you have the means to do skate skiing and classic skiing, you can do those two things. I have seen people do like a run sort of out of that if they are runners, like Molly's talking about. And then also something like snowshoeing or fat biking could be combined at a lot of these centers. And then some people can do this from their home as well, so they could jump onto the indoor trainer. But these combination sessions are really a great way to get in a bit of volume without overdoing the indoor trainer time or overdoing the skate skiing time or overdoing your running time where you end up with like an injury or a burnout type situation. It's just you've stared at your Zwift screen too long. So great idea that you're using there.
Or in our case, we're treadmilling and trainer time together watching the Taylor Swift Eras Tour documentary.
Okay, are you saying you overdid that?
I'm saying stimulus? You might have overdone that. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, we have a few questions today.
Yes, we are talking about post-workout hunger. We're talking about creatine, and we are talking heart rate decoupling. So I think we'll get into it with the post-workout hunger and late-day energy crashes because this is, I think, something that most of us can empathize with or have had in the past, if not on a constant basis. So the question is, reporting intense hunger an hour or two after hard workouts. What fueling strategies before, during, and immediately after riding help prevent this? Ooh. So this is a great question. Do we have any more context for it, or is that okay?
I don't think so. I think this just came in. Yeah.
Okay, this is fantastic. I love this question as someone who often does have the late afternoon energy crash or the couple hours after energy crash, even if I have actually fueled decently during and after. So I'll say from if you're already doing everything right, and I think we'll go into what does that look like in a second, even if you're doing everything right, oftentimes the way adult schedules work is that we have breakfast, we maybe train, then we have lunch, then we have nothing, then we have dinner. And then that's kind of it, right? We don't really make time for snacks except for when we're actually training, we're fueling on the bike, theoretically.
Mm-hmm. Well, and remember, some people it could be work all day, maybe not eating. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're getting a workout in after work or after dinner, perhaps. But there's that big chunk of the day, breakfast through lunch, maybe snacks, maybe even dinner that might have been lighter, perhaps. You're busy or you're not eating to try and lose weight or you're saving the calories for after your bike or your workout. So there's a lot of reasons that you might not be fueling ahead of this workout.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my toxic trait, if I had to name it, is I've definitely had the thing where we go out on our walk with the dog in the afternoon, like late afternoon, and I bonk on the walk, because I ate lunch, I fueled my training, but I needed to have a snack in the afternoon because I didn't get enough in. Like, I need that afternoon snack. And I think adults tend to skip the afternoon snack, especially we're busy, right? The reason I don't eat it isn't because I'm trying to watch my weight or anything like that. It's just that I'm in the work zone, and then I come out of it to go for our walk. And at that point, I've just completely forgotten.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of variables, right? Because everyone's schedule is different, their training load is different, their age is different. There's so many factors. So what I like to often start with is you're a person, you are existing this far. If you're doing these workouts, you're obviously doing something that is fantastic. So we're just trying to try something a little different that might help avoid that situation. Maybe you feel better in subsequent workouts, you perform better as well. So the idea would be to say, okay, I'm thinking maybe this is like a breakfast, or like front loading the calories is often what you're going to see. I know the dietitians we've had on, Alex Larson, Kylie Van Horn, Stevie Lynn Smith, all of them have spoke a lot. I think almost all of them, at least one of the appearances on the podcast, around shifting calories earlier ahead of the workout, fueling the work required. The energy is available. These are the things that are sort of often getting us sideways, where we don't have the fuel on board during the workout, but then also we're ending up with perhaps a blood sugar regulation issue there as well, where we're sort of like short on calories, high on calories. So what I would suggest is coming in and seeing if we can put some of those calories earlier in the day. So that would be helping with breakfast. That would be during the workout. Can we get in more? And then, as Molly's saying, maybe it is, if you do train earlier in the day, then that afternoon snack probably for everyone is good, right? You see that sort of 3 to 4 hours we try and work. So if you have eaten lunch around noon, then 3 or 4 o'clock, you're going to probably need something, because you're probably not eating dinner till 6 or 7, which is again another 3 or 4. So we sort of forget about that gap sometimes, and there would be a gap like that in the morning for a lot of people too. So it is okay to have a snack and try having a snack for 2 weeks. And if you don't like what happens when you have a snack, then go back to doing it the other way. But that would be where I would look at that for sure.
And I think that's really where, especially if you're busy, liquid nutrition, so more of that smoothie, protein shake, whatever, that you can eat at the desk while at work, that kind of thing, becomes really important. Because yes, it is hard to break for a proper sit-down snack when you are working a normal job.
For sure. Yeah. And so I have had athletes do that. They do it either the day before they get this thing mixed up or whatever, or they have something like, I'm pretty easy going with that. So I'll just have like a big jug of whatever recovery powder or protein powder, and I'll just put it wherever I need to be, in the van or wherever it is. And then I have it on hand when I need it. It's not the most gourmet solution, but we're just trying to see if this does improve this crashing later, or this hunger later. And so what I think a lot of people, and maybe with this question too, is more that evening dessert. We end up with 1,000 plus calories after 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night, because we're ravenous. And that is the idea, that if we could shift some of this stuff earlier, put more of the stuff during the workout's going to go better, but you're also not going to have that swing where you come in and you're just ravenous immediately after, or a few hours after, where like I even had dinner, but then I'm still just craving. The cravings are a good sign too, where we're not getting the sugar during the workout. So then the body's saying later that it needs a lot of sugar. So those would be the things I think so often there's some improvements that we can make with that before workout fueling, so that a lot of people might that breakfast, or if you're training after work, it might be that snack that we're skipping might actually be the key meal for you, is getting some of those carbs in. And then during the workout, it's still so rare that we're seeing people fueling a lot of this work. And it doesn't matter for everyone, but the people that are having this disrupted sleep, cravings, like late in the day sort of eating and stuff like that, it probably is part of it. And so again, for 2 weeks, just try, just take a gel or whatever the thing is, add 2 scoops instead of 1 scoop of your sugar powder, and just see if you notice a difference. And if you don't, then carry on, go back to the other way.
I like it. Yeah. The other thing I will mention we've actually been running into is checking on serving size. So we have this container of collagen, for example, that I have a container of collagen. Okay, fine. Yeah. And you recently pointed out to me that the serving size is
disgusting. Yeah.
It's absurd.
Because collagen turns into like a it's
gelatin.
like a taffy.
Yeah.
But it's such a comical amount. So you'll see people on Instagram, put it in their coffee, and you're like, that's like a tenth of what you're supposed to, like, what you read. When everyone's like, collagen has 18 grams of protein.
The amount that you need to take in to get that 18 grams of protein is a little absurd. So I'm taking in 4 grams of protein when I put it in my coffee. And in my head, I'm taking in a full serving. I've done it. I've done an article on Consummate Athlete. We'll maybe include a link to it in the show notes, where I actually used a food scale and measured out what my berries and yogurt situation was.
Comical amount of Greek yogurt to get that 18 grams of protein that's on the side.
Yeah. Ridiculous
Which
amount.
is great, and do it. But Molly's point is valid. Like, this is where we're shortchanging ourselves, where we're having 18 grams of protein, but you're not having it. It's on the side of the jar. You're not having it. The jar has it. So for sure, I think that's where sometimes that might be a great point, is you probably are doing everything right. It's just you're not maybe actually consuming the food that you think you are consuming to support that training.
It's surprising, because like I would have told you I was eating 30 grams worth of protein with my Greek yogurt with the amount that I was using, and I wasn't even getting a full serving of it.
And you measured it, or however you measured it, by weight or with the scoop or whatever, but then you sort of like now can estimate based on, we have the same bowls every day, the same spoons every day, and so you can sort of say, this is the approximate amount, this is what it looks like.
I do not weigh my food every time. I've just done it a few times so I understand what the serving actually looks like, and it was so helpful in showing me how much I was actually under eating while thinking I was eating more.
And I see that. So that's the pre-workout that might be relevant. Again, what is your toast or your peanut butter or your jam or your whatever you're having before your workout? And then during the workout, we actually see this all the time with the scoops of the sugar powder. People will tell me they're having 150 grams of carbs an hour, just like Pagacha. And then it turns out they're having
150 calories.
Yeah. Or something, right? Like, so it's just make sure you know what you're doing, and remember that it's per hour. It's not just 150 grams for 6 hours of riding. It's every hour, which is, again, it's a lot. It is a lot to get in, even 50 grams. And I think most of us, easing up towards that is probably a great target. You're seeing some coming back where most normal people in that 30 to 60 grams even is going to be great. And I think the nice thing is that we're talking about it, because most people don't do anything, is what I'm telling you. I see a lot of athletes every week, and most people they carry the same Cliff Bar or Cliff Gel or whatever they carry in their back pocket, and it comes around with them the whole season. So I think these topics are around fueling and 150 grams per hour that the pros are doing is pulling a lot of us up, where we are actually maybe getting closer to that 30, 60 grams. But if you're finding you're really hungry or craving sugar, or underperforming, under recovering, this is a great 2-week experiment to say, what if I do actually put 2 big scoops of my sugar powder in every bottle I consume for the next month, for the next 2 weeks, and how will it go? And I bet you it will go great. But if not, again, you can go back.
Absolutely. And I will say, this is definitely my issue with liquid nutrition. Everyone knows I tend to prefer Tailwind, liquid calories when I'm racing, all that jazz. But man, is it hard when it's in a pack to know how much you're drinking per hour. So yes, I start my long runs with 1,000 calories in
carrying the carbs with her.
Yeah, I carry them, but do they actually get consumed?
And certainly tough this time of year too, where you might not even need as much water as you might have taken in on your runs. When it's warm out, you probably consume a whole pack when you're out running, and then when it's cold, it probably freezes and you don't consume any of it.
For sure.
So that is where sometimes these flasks, now you're seeing a lot of people will mix up like a real heavy runner's flask, the soft flasks. So it's really thick with their sugar powder. And then they know that I have to finish this flask, a third of it every hour during my 3-hour ski or my 3-hour trainer ride. But then you can just consume straight water, or water with some salt in it, or water with electrolytes in it, whatever you're doing, in addition to that heavy mix of your sugar powder, so that you're isolating that fuel in the same way you would with gels or bars. But this is where you can use that same big jug of sugar powder.
Yeah. My last thought on this is actually, to the note of water, hydration. While I don't think it's necessarily the case in this situation, it is worth pointing out sometimes when we think that we're hungry, we're actually just thirsty. We are at the time of year where if you're training outside, you may not be drinking much, if anything. So you may actually also just be feeling thirsty because it's not hot, so you're not drinking as much water. I know for me, my water consumption like tanks in the winter unless I'm really specific about making sure that I'm drinking herbal tea and all that kind of stuff during the day, because I don't really like cold water when it's already freaking cold out.
And our indoor trainers, Zwifter folks are this is like, it's definitely the risk. Like when I talk about how I always have reservations with a lot of indoor training, as much as I do indoor cycling training and lots of it, it is a very tough thing because you are sweating and sweating and sweating and sweating, and there's can be some really wonky stuff happen. So you want to make sure that you are getting that water and some salts even back in, because the consumption can be quite high. And as always, trying to cool and fuel as much as you can with those indoor rides. So getting the environment down, cooled down, and then lots of fans as well. But again, you're going to still sweat even when you do that. So you do want to make sure that you're getting that classic sort of bottle an hour at least. And then certainly afterwards, getting some water back in you as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, hopefully that helps. And again, feel free to message us with more specific questions, or if you have more nuance to add to that one and you want different tips and tricks, hit us up. Okay, next one, creatine. So what's our current take on creatine, especially for perimenopausal women, or as a useful supplement for endurance athletes? I will start this by saying we are not registered dietitians. We are not doctors. Mm-hmm. We don't even pretend to play them on the internet. But we are endurance athletes. We are coaches. We have experience in nutrition. And we, look into a lot of this stuff. We test a lot of it for ourselves. And as a both endurance athlete and I'm going to say getting into perimenopausal women territory, I will say I have now been using creatine for almost a year. And while I am not going to say like it magically gave me a 6-pack or anything like that, I think it's been working well for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. I would say I've never really noticed a ton, to be honest, but I've taken it on and off for years, I guess. It is well researched. They always say this is one of the most well researched and safe and cheap supplements, which doesn't often align like that. You don't see a lot of negative things about creatine. You see the odd person who doesn't like it for a variety of reasons, but it's pretty minimal, any of the symptoms or side effects. We had Alex Larson on, and she spoke. We actually did a specific question around, so that is an RD who talked about it, and she was mostly positive on it.
Yep, I actually just talked to another registered dietitian, Namrita Brooke, the other day, and we were both talking about creatine. She's been doing it too, and says sort of the same thing. There's really no evidence against it, and currently a lot of evidence for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you'll see a bit on the socials that people are trying to push the amounts and all this other stuff, but I think probably just sticking to what people have done, it's that sort of around 5 grams. There is a measurement that's related to your body size as well, but it usually ends up in around that range. I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of downside, but I think also a lot of these supplements, they're just not going to be, if they're legal, they're in terms of doping controls, they're usually not so profound that it's going to be this life-changing thing for you.
I think especially for endurance athletes, I keep hearing kind of in the wellnessy world, women that are starting to take creatine and are claiming that they're seeing all of these muscle growth benefits and stuff like that. I'm going to say if you're an endurance athlete who pays attention to their body and isn't trying to sell creatine, you are not going to see those changes.
Yeah, you always want to know that, right? And so, and sometimes there's scare tactics with this, if you're not taking creatine, you won't build muscle. And I don't think that's the situation either. But yeah, it's something that you could certainly try.
I will also add our usual caveat of anything supplement-wise. Actually, 2 caveats. 1, make sure if you are taking it, you're looking for a good source. That usually means it's got some kind of third-party certification, informed choice, NSF for sport, or even just NSF, honestly, unless you're really worried about getting tested. But generally, look for a good source. And second caveat, to the extent that it's not a magic cure-all, it's also not meant to be a first line of defense in your nutrition journey. So please prioritize your protein, your fiber, your fueling your ride appropriately, your hydration, your sleep, all of that stuff before you start thinking about what fun supplements you can mix in.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think the other thing to consider, you did mention sort of the influencers and wellness folks, the people who are on sort of vegetarian, vegan, plant-based diets. I believe also like creatine is in meat products. So if you do avoid those things, then it might be something that would be a logical supplement to the diet that you're consuming. And then maybe for people like myself that do consume a fair bit of meat, like maybe that's why I don't notice much difference when I take it, right? That probably makes some sense as well. And like you say, also because like the sports I do aren't that wildly explosive. Mountain biking does have some, and I'm not the greatest sprinter, but I can't say that I notice that my sprint power skyrockets or anything like that.
Yes. And just the caveat for perimenopausal women. Yes, the first, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks of taking it, again, if you're an endurance athlete and you are very body aware, you may notice that you do feel a little bit puffy, we'll say. I definitely noticed it, and because of that, I ended up having to like start and restart it several times because I would get really annoyed with that and then stop, and then you don't really store it, so you have to restart all over again when you start taking it. So if you can just push through the first couple weeks and see what happens, it usually does go away. The water, because like the theory is it's helping like retain water in cells, if I understand the very basic concept of it.
That's fair enough. But you said it was for perimenopause. Why is that specific?
Well, for women in particular tend to report that it makes them feel a little bit bloated, a little bit like they're carrying some water weight, basically. Okay.
And sometimes you'll see, I don't know if it wasn't the case in your situation, but sometimes you'll see on the side of the thing that they want you to do like a loading phase. And some people used to do that to like get the stores up quicker. But what I've seen is that like a lot of that water retention is mitigated if you just start on the dosage, which again is around 5 grams or 1 scoop probably in the most of them. And then that sort of like mitigates some of that. Whereas if you suddenly take 20 for 5 days or whatever the loading is, that was when there was sort of like more of a sudden like shift that people notice. So your results may vary. There we go.
But yes, it's a trend we sign on with, I guess. Sign on for? I don't know. Debatably. Okay. Here's one that speaks to your expertise much more. For master cyclists focused on endurance maintenance, how should your heart rate decouple during long zone 2, or how should heart rate decoupling during long zone 2 rides be interpreted? Is it better to hold the heart rate steady or hold the power steady when drift appears? So if I understand this question correctly, what they're saying is they're doing a zone 2, so an endurance ride. This is our conversational, but like maybe a little bit hard pace. A little bit harder than our recovery ride, but easy enough that you can still maintain a conversation. And we're doing this by power and heart rate. Usually those zones would be the same, right? You have a heart rate zone for zone 2 and you have a power zone for zone 2. In theory, when you're in zone 2, you're in both zone 2s for heart rate and power. So this question is asking, if my heart rate starts to go whether up or down, but the power is staying in that zone 2 range, should I back down or push harder on the power to match the heart rate?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the rough idea. Decoupling, this is like a Joe Friel thing. I think Uncle Joe came up with this. So if you want to go back, I'll try and find like an old Joe Friel blog post, but if you looked up Joe Friel decoupling blog, probably on Google, you'd probably find it. So you can sort of see the source and like what the idea was with it, but that's sort of like endurance, right? Or heart rate drift might be an associated sort of concept. And so you're riding, everyone's sort of felt this, and then at some point, your heart rate increases if you hold the power steady. Or if you hold the heart rate steady, the power might drop. So in Molly's zone analogy, which is mostly true, I think you're right. Like usually you would expect like your heart rate and your power zones to be about the same, maybe not perfectly aligned, but about the same. But you might be riding along in zone 2 everything, and then all of a sudden to hold your power the same, your heart rate goes up into zone 3, so more into the tempo zone or moderate zone. And then you have to make a choice. Like, are you driven? Is your training philosophy, is it based around heart rate or is it based around power? Or you could say like this time of year, is it more relevant for me to stay on this pace? The power and whatever happens with heart rate, I don't care, even though this is now becoming a higher or moderate intensity workout based on the strain on your body that the heart rate's expressing. So it's sort of like a decision you need to make as an athlete or a coach, is like, what are we going to prioritize for this workout? And then perhaps just in general, what do you prioritize in your training?
Okay, so let's maybe look at it the two different directions. So let's say they're in the zone 2 power and the heart rate is going higher. And again, zone 2 ride. We're not talking about just training in general. We're not talking about decoupling in general. We're specifically talking zone 2.
Not on your mountain bike rides and not really like intervals. Like you could look at that, but like it's not really the point of it.
But that's not this question.
No. And it's not really the point of decoupling. Yeah. Like it's really for this. So if you're out on your mountain bike riding, and it's really up and down because every mountain bike ride is up and like you're coasting. It's like, it's not, you could look at that metric, but like, that's not it's not relevant.
Okay. Yeah. So you're on your road ride, your zone 2 road ride, and your heart rate is starting to creep up above zone 2, but your power is staying down in zone 2. Mm-hmm. How are you thinking about that? What are you doing? By your own philosophy.
So like either could happen. It just depends how you like decide to respond to it, right? Does that make sense?
Well, I know both could happen. I'm saying, what would you do? Like, how would you look at this with a client?
Always, I would go by heart rate. Yeah, like, and let the power drop.
And then, what about the other situation where the heart rate is actually lower and the power is still in zone 2?
Oh, so you're saying like your heart rate is like becoming depressed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or just drop it. Like maybe it's starting to feel too easy. So I think there's two ways you could look at if the heart rate's lower.
That's like very irregular for that to happen, to have your heart rate like in the feeling to drop.
Wouldn't that be the ideal if you're getting better as an athlete?
So now you're going on to like long term.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not what decoupling is though. Decoupling is just within a ride.
Yeah, but within how else is it going to happen over time? It's going to happen within a ride at some point. Like you're going to have to notice it at some point in a ride.
Right.
There has to be the inflection point where you realize, oh, my heart rate's actually lower while I'm in this power zone. Maybe I need to shift my power zones.
Oh.
So I think if it's happening multiple times, if it's like every ride, your heart rate's actually lower than it's in zone 1 while you're riding in zone 2 in your power, you may actually just need to look at your zones, and it might be time to increase the power in your zone 2.
That's like a sort of a separate thing, but that would be the idea that you're like riding along and suddenly your power is higher than your power zone. So yeah, that's a good indication that like your threshold is probably, your zones have moved, your threshold, however you make your zones, you've gotten fitter. So at any given heart rate, your power is higher, your speed is higher. Yeah. So that would be like a great indicator. Without testing, you could find out that like, yeah, I am getting fitter. And we actually sometimes do that test where we'll like hold the heart rate at just under 75% of max heart rate. So just at the top of zone 2. And then we'll say, what is the power when you pedal really steady at that for about half an hour or even up to 90 minutes? Like what is the power? What happens to the power when you hold the heart rate super steady? And that would be the sign that like, sometimes it works out that way, that like, yeah, you're pushing zone 3 power, but the perceived exertion, the heart rate is actually still down in that endurance low intensity, or what some might call zone 2.
Okay. I like it.
So yeah, that's a positive thing. But again, that's more on the like, I guess you're right. Like it could happen in a single ride. But what I think this question is more related to like you're riding along and then there's a decoupling or an inflection where the heart rate drifts and it goes up, and then you have to make a decision what to do. Right.
And normally in that case, you would back off, so you'd back off if the heart rate's high to get down to where the heart rate's in zone 2. What if the heart rate's depressed? So not a sign of fitness, but it's just really like it's suddenly lower, because that can happen if your HRV is sort of funky and overtrained.
This is also not in a single ride. But yes, over time you could find that it's very hard feeling. And this would happen like if you were a night shift person, or like you just flew across to Europe or something like that, and you tried to ride your bike, or maybe you've been in Europe for a week or two and really been pushing the volume, or in a stage race, you'll see this a lot of times where you'll push, you are working as hard as you can, but you cannot like push, like it's so hard to get your heart rate to come up, but the watts are up, like you're going hard, but then the heart rate is like sticky or low or depressed or suppressed. There's like all these things. So often when the feeling, that's why this feeling, we can't ever forget about that third metric, is always very relevant. Where like if you're pushing hard by feeling and by power and the heart rate is sticking into zone 2 or just lower, then that, is like a sign of like you need to stop before you get too deep into this hole for sure. And that's where muscular soreness can be really, really good indicator of fatigue and again, the need for recovery. but we always say that isn't captured in something like an HRV or some of these metrics and data things. You can't really capture muscular soreness except by being a person who acknowledges this in their subjective existence. So that would be something to observe and not celebrate. Sometimes as heart rate, as endurance athletes or people, we always think like there's like this higher is better, but then a few things we think lower is better. And heart rate, we're always like, wow, our resting heart rate's 30. And it's like when you start seeing these like low, oh yeah, I could barely push my heart rate over 100 on my ride today. And you're like, no, that's not great. Like you need to take recovery and start eating more probably. So that would be like a great thing as well. But again, that would be more of like a longer term, or like today my heart rate is like that, versus this other phenomenon that I think this question is asking about that you keep taking me off of, is that like we're riding and then there's a drift in the heart rate. And so this was Joe Friel's decoupling metric. In Training Peaks, you'll see power to heart rate as like a ratio and a percentage. And again, we usually just, a good sign is that on say a 3-hour ride, a 5-hour ride, that you don't see much decoupling, maybe under 5%. So again, you can see that in Training Peaks. And again, if you look up like these Joe Friel blogs, which I'll try and find and link, you want to keep that just steady. And that would be the idea that like what Molly described, where like mostly your zones align, you can keep that the same for longer and longer and longer as is relevant to you. I don't think, personally, I don't worry too much about this because most of my stuff isn't too long. But if you were doing these 5 and 6 and 12-hour gravel races, like it's really the name of the game is like how well are you, like how, I don't want to say durable because gets us even more complicated. But how well do you endure? We're just saying like how consistent and enduring is your endurance, right? And how long till you start drifting or fading?
Right. Because while endurance is theoretically the all-day pace, you can't really go from like just starting to ride to I can hold this exact same thing for 16 hours and it's not going to, like my body is going to be totally fine with it.
Right. And that's it. Fatigue and fading can happen for lots of reasons. Dehydration, lack of fueling, right? Like your body will run until like you run out of fuel or energy, or again, there could be anything like muscular type stuff could start breaking. And certainly with runners, right?
I think there's a lot of runners that start 100-milers going in their zone 2 and staying in their zone 2. And at mile 15, they're done with zone 2. They have no more zone 2 to give.
Running has more mechanical stuff, but you could certainly see that with biking too over time as well, like other reasons that you start caving in and just losing, like dropping off. But again, this might be different because if I started getting muscular or mechanically, you would see your pace in running or your power in biking drop, but then the heart rate often will come with it. So they're not decoupled, but they are fading, right? You are dropping off, but that's not this like phenomenon that Joe Friel has talked about here, is this like decoupling where the heart rate does something different than the heart rate, than the power or the pace.
Well, I could see someone holding their, like trying to maintain their pace though in running. Like you set out to do a 50-miler or whatever. You're like, okay, I'm going to do a 10-minute pace the whole time. And you're doing it the first 10 miles, your heart rate's in that steady zone 2. Yeah. But you keep holding that pace and that heart rate is going to start notching up.
So then those would be two things you could ponder then. So there's like that philosophical question. Someone who's like very power driven, like a Andy Kogan type, like if you really love Andy Kogan's work, all the FTP stuff, you might make the decision that like power is all that matters. They don't even have a heart rate strap on probably if they're really in that school of thought. And so they would just hold that power forever. And there's probably a place for that. I hesitate with it, but there is probably a place that like at some point when you're doing these gravel races, you just keep riding. Like when I did that 100-miler gravel, it was 240 watts, which is right when I do my 30-minute sub-max test. But I'll tell you, like 240 watts got really hard to hold. And like, indeed, my heart rate had drifted up into like being a pretty steady, hard effort over the course of that race, right? So I think that's fantastic and makes a lot of sense that like sometimes we do have to keep on with that.
I think the one thing we haven't really touched on here is the third metric, like rate of perceived exertion. I think that can decouple as like, I think if that's decoupled, to me, that's actually like almost the more interesting thing. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, your heart rate decouples. How is your rate of perceived exertion? How hard do you actually think this feels? Mm-hmm. I think is also really important information because I think too often we look at the numbers and we're actually not thinking about how hard it feels. We're looking at our numbers and we're freaking out about our numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that probably happens a lot of the time. Like that's what I just sort of described, right? Where like actually heart rate and power are dropping together because the load is decreasing. So heart rate is saying, well, cardiovascularly, I'm not like, it's fine. I can push less watts and I'll just go down with it. So those two lines, if you picture your like workout or race file, they're going along, their zone 2 or 3 or whatever you're racing at. And then they just start going down because it's gotten harder. And what is that for? That could be fueling, that could be muscular fatigue often will cause that decrease. But yeah, that's the idea is that like, but then yeah, that isn't necessarily this decoupling. You might have trained your endurance capacity really well, but then found that, oh, this got too muscular. I forgot to fuel. I got dehydrated. I got sad. Right. There's like all these other factors that cause fatigue and fading that aren't necessarily related to this like decoupling phenomenon.
It's true. Sad often gets me. And last thing I'll add is checking your devices. Sometimes it might actually just be that your sensors are wonky or your power is reading high or low.
Yeah. I would say for runners, sometimes you do get with that like GPS drift and stuff, which can be super frustrating if you're trying to really watch something like this.
Especially trail running for sure. Or any kind of like really windy, like neighborhood run, that kind of thing.
Well, and again, you would want to not, like at some point this just isn't a relevant metric. It's like when people say zone 2 and I'm always like, you shouldn't like just say that if it's not if that's not what you're doing. If you're not riding in something, I don't care what metric or if you're pricking your finger for lactates or whatever, but if you're going to use that, like probably you would need to have your power in zone 2 or your heart rate in zone 2 or your lactate or whatever you're going to base off of. But all people will say it and they're doing a mountain bike ride where they're coasting half the time and surging in zone 6. And then you look at it and they accumulated zone 1 and zone 6 time. It's not quite the same as whatever they were trying to do. Right. So yeah, definitely if you get mad with the metrics and the tracking too, it might be how you're doing it. But then to your point, it can also be the devices might be misleading as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Well, I think we should wrap up there. Before we go, quick thank you to our sponsors over at Payable. So if you've ever wanted to take a payment in a Google form, now you can with the Payable add-on. Super easy to use. You can find out all about it at payableapps.com/athlete. We use it for pretty much everything and highly recommend. All right, with that, keep the questions coming. Thanks for tuning in. Happy training, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.